There was a lot of interest in the XX1300 Racer from the Princeton video, so I decided to show you the differences between the XX and the consumer sled. So let's start up here at the front view. On the right, over here, is the XX1300 Factory Racer. And over here on the left is a Consumer Mark IV. So obviously you're going to go, oh, blue skis, black skis, blue stripes, and this has got this area blacked in. Well, I'll tell you right now, I think this blacked in area, I think some person just did that. I don't think it came that way from the factory. At least I haven't seen any in the brochures. But, you know, at first glance, they're pretty similar. Obviously, I could swap the hoods from one to the other and the hood will fit. It's the same basic hood. So let's move a little further back. So the XX has this sleek little racing seat. Not a lot of padding in it. No rear storage area. It's got a storage area up here with a zipper, and it's got some room for spark plugs and stuff. Meanwhile, the consumer sled has this two-up seat with grab handles, I might add, that the race sled doesn't have. And underneath the two-up seat is, well, it's a big storage space. What could we fit in there? And lots of space in the back as well. So I said the hoods are the same, but obviously there's one glaring difference. I popped up the pop-up headlight on the consumer sled. And there's no such provision for a headlight over here on the race sled. It does look like somebody maybe had one mounted there at one point, but there's just like a ductwork under there. So I'll flip these hoods off of the sleds real quick and show you the undersides and show you what that looks like. So here's the underside of the consumer sled. It's got this sheet metal box, and you know the hinges are kind of part of that bracketry in there. And it's got some taller sides there. Well, taller when you compare it over here to the race sled. So it's also got a little sheet metal box and, you know, bolts to the same bosses in the hood, but it's lower in profile and there's just no provision for a headlight on that. At some point, I'm going to want to run this race sled on the trail, and lights are required in Minnesota. So I have a spare consumer hood. I think I'll just stripe it up with some blue stripes and go for that for the trail and not doctor up this race hood. This XX1300 has a Hurt 292cc twin, and it's got twin HR carbs on it. Depending on the year it was made, it was advertised as either 28 or 30 horsepower. Meanwhile, the Mark IV over here also has a 292cc engine, but it's a single cylinder. As you can see, it's a J-Lo Rockwell, and it's got, let's see, can you see the recoil there? It's got one till it's an HD carb, and it was advertised, once again, depending on the year, as 19.5 or 20 horsepower. So the consumer sled has this nice little close off that keeps a little bit of the carb schmoo off of your riding leathers. And yeah, not so much. Kind of a scarf sucker over here on the race sled. So the race sled's got this big belt guard, and she's a big solid piece of steel. Maybe it's aluminum, I can't tell. Pretty substantial. Meanwhile, the consumer sled has this fiberglass piece, and I can very easily disconnect it, well, with two hands and take it off. It will protect you from a broken belt. I can tell you from experience when I was a child that it did. But you know, those are some of the differences. All right, so the tunnel on the race sled is obviously, it's aluminum, and it's a steel tunnel over here on the consumer sled. You see that in the sunlight? And it's a steel belly pan. And in fact, the entire chassis on the consumer sled is steel. Now, I've had people tell me that on these XX race sleds that the belly pan was aluminum, the chassis was all aluminum. Well, whoever told me that was wrong. That is definitely steel. The magnet sticks to it. So I'm going to peel the hood off, and we'll take a look under there next. So under the hood, we have a lot of similarities, and obviously the big difference, once again, is the twin-cylinder motor. So the race sled has this Donaldson muffler that's been cut down and welded up for some reason, probably just to make it fit. Over here on the consumer, well, it's got the whole muffler. And it's also, on this particular model, got a big giant garden tractor battery and a regulator rectifier. And the electric start works on this thing. I'm sure the battery's dead. So the gas tank, on the earlier consumer sleds, it was steel. And my childhood sled, sure enough, it had that steel gas tank on it. Later sleds, it was plastic. This is really not a difference between a consumer sled and a race sled. I think it's more of a model year difference. You can see, as you look at the bulkhead on here, it's clearly a steel bulkhead that's riveted to an aluminum tunnel. So the race sleds aren't all aluminum, it's just an aluminum tunnel. Driveline wise, well, this race sled doesn't have the correct clutch. That's Comet Duster someone put on. It had a bigger Salisbury on it originally. That's long gone. Other than that, the driveline's pretty similar. And we covered a lot of that when I built the Daddler one-lung race sled. We blew this entire jack shaft area apart and rebuilt it. So I'll throw a link to that up in the corner and you can check that out. But you can see it's absolutely identical, although this does have the smaller Salisbury clutch on it. So that's the vast majority of the differences, but let me tip these things up on the side so you can take a look underneath. There's still more differences. So one more underhood difference is this heat shield. And I know a lot of consumer sleds actually did come with them. And that might be a model year difference, or it might just be missing off my consumer sled over here. I'm not sure. Oh, here's another difference. This one's crazy. I just noticed this. Look at where the exhaust goes out. The exhaust goes right into the tunnel on the race sled. On the consumer sled, well, it just goes out the bottom of the belly pan. Very interesting. So here's the consumer sled. Hopefully the shadows aren't too bad. You can see that it's a rubber track with bogey wheels. Now, this has been converted to a skidoo track and skidoo drivers, but the original AMF stuff was largely the same. It just didn't have any metal track clips on it. And there's a slight difference in the pitch. So if you're going to convert it, you do have to do it as a set and do the track and drivers. So over here on the XX Racer, we got cleats. Not only cleats, but we have a skid that I have been told was purchased from Articat. And it sure does look like Articat handiwork in there, doesn't it? And the drive wheels are also Articat. So that's kind of nice. That stuff's not too bad to find. Really pretty cool that it's got that. The bottom of the skis, you can see there's some carbides on there. It looks like there was a lot of carbide front to rear at one point, and now we got about a foot of it missing. So I will have to do something about that at some point. Over here on the consumer sled, yeah, they're the same skis, just doesn't have carbides. Really no difference there. And as you can see, neither one had ski shocks on them. So I'll flip these back right side up now. Here's another difference I noticed. Look at the ski loops. So the ski blanks appear to be the same, but the loops are very different. So you can see on the consumer sled, we kind of have that little bit of a point out there because the loop's just butt welded and the rest of the welds are hidden underneath there. Now, if we look at the race sled, well, these loops go out in front of the ski to give, basically a blunt front edge, and they're welded under here. They are still kind of hidden underneath, down here underneath the perch, but very different on the ski loops. Now the springs and the rest of the skis, I'm going to say that they're pretty much identical. Well, I'll just do a little walk around now so you can kind of drink in the rest of it. But some years the consumer sleds had this kickstand on the back, and this was really nice. As a kid, you know, my sled slept outdoors a lot of nights, and I could put it up on the kickstand before I went in, and the track didn't freeze to the ground. These consumer sleds, a lot of them I've seen had these kind of fabric sewn up snow flaps. Pretty typical. It might just be a year difference, like a model year difference, but you can see the Mark IV over here has got a molded rubber mud flap with an AMF logo in it. Obviously a different light, very different on the lights. We mentioned the grab handles and the seat. So the consumer sleds had this big console. You know, it is what it is. You like it, you don't. You can see the handlebars are totally different between the consumer sled and the race sled. The race sled had a kill switch up here, which the consumer sleds did not. But when we get to the hoop here, pretty much the same hoop. Ooh, this hoop is aluminum though. All right, so there's a big difference between a race sled and a consumer sled. An aluminum steering hoop, and this one is definitely steel. So the handlebars are a little different. There's some differences in the bulkhead. I'm not sure what this is for. I honestly don't know. For some reason, the belly pan, even though it's steel, is pop riveted on the race sled. You can see the pop rivets here. And on the consumer sled, it was just welded on. Maybe it's a heavier gauge, I'm not sure. But I do know a magnet sticks to that one, to the race sled, so it's definitely not aluminum. The front bumpers appear to be identical. Like I said, the skis and the spindles are identical. Ski spreaders were not stock, but they did have forged spindles with this offset to them. And then the race sled, you can see it's got spreaders. So I've ran those spreaders for years on my one lung racer, and they've held up pretty good to the abuse. I don't know, I attribute it to the forged spindles. They've been pretty good. So give you a little more of a walk around. You know, I mentioned the kill switch, but I sure better mention the tachometer. Surely you guys noticed that tachometer. I do not know if that was factory equipment or if that was aftermarket, but it's a nice aero tack. And this motor is supposed to spin to 8,000 RPM. So that tack is going to come in real handy when I'm clutching this thing. So I'm sure I ran right past a bunch of other obvious differences that you can see from the video. I probably just thought they were minor and didn't mention them, but you never know. Maybe I didn't notice either. So if you want to leave a comment about it, well, please, by all means do. Or maybe you're a skedaddler expert. You know way more about these than me. Well, for sure, jump in the comments and start listing off the differences. I'd appreciate to gain the knowledge from you. I hope you enjoyed this comparison between the consumer AMF skedaddler and the race AMF skedaddler. I know I enjoyed showing them off to you. So I've got some thanks to say, and I want to start off with Jeff Lewis. Jeff hit super thanks many times in the last month, and I really appreciate it, Jeff. Not only does it help the channel financially, the same as Patreon does, but that super thanks really gets the attention of the YouTube algorithm and really kind of makes it promote the videos more. So Jeff, huge thanks to you. And of course, I have to thank the patrons who support us every month. Now, for those that don't know, in return for the small donation they give us over on Patreon, they get to watch all the videos early and they get to see them ad-free. And, you know, we really appreciate it. We got a couple different levels over there. And, you know, it's like the beer and spark plugs fund and the pizza and parts fund. Whichever one you want to help at, well, that would be just great. Everybody else, well, if you watch this far, obviously you're enjoying these videos. So please at least hit subscribe. Subscriptions are free. Go for it. And if you hit that notification so that you know when we have new videos coming out, well, that's even better. Thanks for watching.